Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and today is the final in the set of videos from ARC's September meet, and last, and very much least in this case, we have Flaming Dragon, which is a B-League robot, which means it's allowed to run plastic weapons, and that's about it. And it goes into the B-League class, which is more of a beginner's class, but I use it to run kind of interesting robot designs that I don't really think I have a chance with otherwise. And that's very much the case with Flaming Dragon. Now, for those of you who haven't seen this, Flaming Dragon is a robot that I designed when I was a lot younger, when I first watched a couple of episodes of Robot Wars way back in the day. It has two different weapons, a spinner at the front and an axe at the back. It's also four-wheel drive. And it was, an interesting little build to make. I will leave a link to that in the description to this video. But it turns out it had some pretty serious problems, but all those problems are pretty self-evident when you look at the fights. So we will look at the fights, and after each one I will discuss a little bit the problems that it was facing in those fights. So, without further ado, the first fight up is the Force, which is itself a four-wheel drive, kind of tank steer robot, which is pretty interesting, and it has a vertical spinning weapon as well.
2, 1, go!
So we lost that one. We got pushed into the pit, which is what happens when you run your wheels on bolts and you have a very tight tolerance onto that bolt, because as I was driving forwards or backwards, the wheels were tightening themselves in or loosening themselves off. And if they tightened too far, they jammed into the chassis and ground and kind of stopped moving. And if they went too far back out, they lost connection with the drive gear in the center of the robot chassis and then couldn't drive. So it was a constant fight trying to go in the right directions to actually get the drive wheels to engage. It was a huge, huge, huge pain. I was very limpy in that fight and I managed to limp around a little bit, but as I said, it was very, very difficult to fight this fight. The other problem that we faced was the weapon. So this weapon is 4 teeth and very spiky 4 teeth. It's also on a tiny, tiny little brushless motor, the only thing I had weight for in this build that has a lot of other stuff going on. All of that means that it's spinning very, very, very fast, and also it has 4 teeth. So if you've watched my bite versus MOI video, you know that this thing has no bite. It basically just grinds at its opponents. It also has no feeder wedges because there was no feeder wedges in the original design. So it has a very hard time getting in underneath people, which basically means that the weapon just kind of grinds against my opponent and does nothing. So there's a lot of things that we could change about Flaming Dragon to make it a more effective machine, but this is why it was in the B League. And the thing is, we might go through and change some of these in the future, but try and leave the kind of appeal and shape and original intent of Flaming Dragon the same, but improve it a little bit so that it actually, you know, does things properly. Now, speaking of improvements between this fight and the next fight, I did actually drill out the wheels. So I drilled out the wheels with a 3.5mm drill bit, which left them a little bit wobbly and a little bit loose, but meant that they didn't screw in and out anymore as it was driving around. So I was able to drive a little bit better in this next fight, and this next fight is up against Killdozer, which is another robot that has tracks. It's a very, very push-heavy robot. It's got a nice big scoop at the front, a couple of tracks. It's a very, very pushy robot.
3, 2, 1, go!
And so, of course, we lost this one by being pushed down the pit. I was, of course, pushing back against him, but running on 4 O-rings versus 2 tracks, there was no fight there. I really should have tried to turn away from him. The problem with that is that this fight, now that I could actually drive a little bit better, revealed that because the motors are geared to the wheels, the wheels are actually running a different direction to the gears on the motor, which means that while the whole robot drives forwards when I push forwards, when I push left to turn left, the robot actually turned right, which is a big problem, and it makes it very, very hard to get your head around. It's not something that you can very easily unlearn when you're in the middle of a fight like that. And normally for this type of thing, between this fight and the next fight, I would have turned around and fiddled with the setup on my controller to get it to work properly on the controller. The problem was that Annie, Are You Okay? Was also running the same controller, and she was doing well in this tournament so far. Flaming Dragon was on 2 losses, so I didn't want to mess with my controller and forget and then have that affect Annie's performance. So I just left Flaming Dragon flailing around and having its controls all back to front. So the next fight up is up against a pushy wedge. This is the B League. There's a lot of pushy wedges and lone bots and things in this class. So this is just basically just a straight red wedge called Red Plover.
3, 2, 1.
So we had a draw in this fight, but all the same issues are still there. The turning is messing me up, not being able to hit things with the weapon because it's just grindy and has no bite is messing me up. So a draw is what happened. I mean, it was about as good as I could have really hoped for in this fight. There's things that we need to change and do and upgrade and things like that. Now, we're currently 2 losses and a draw for this tournament, and we have 1 more fight left to go. It is up against a robot called Sharky. It's not my Sharky. My Sharky is actually in my workshop. This is a different Sharky, and it was actually given to a very small child to drive for this fight. That left me a little bit worried because Flaming Dragon here hasn't been doing very well at all in any of these fights, so I was worried I was about to lose to a very small child.
2, 1, go!
And thankfully, yeah, they drove themselves into the pit, which, I mean, it's not too surprising. They were a young child, and they were basically there just to watch, so they'd never driven a robot before, so it's, you know, it was semi-expected, but at the same time, with all the issues that Flaming Dragon had and still has, I was worried that I could possibly lose that fight. So we won, but I mean, yeah, it's not anything I did or the robot did. It's not really a win, right? It is on paper. That's about it. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I can and should be doing with Flaming Dragon. I think moving it over to a different controller that has easily set models so that I can just flick into the right model to drive Flaming Dragon and have it have its own controller set up would be really handy. I had a little bit of weight left, so maybe putting some different bearings in rather than relying on the plastic on the screws could help quite a lot. And yeah, completely changing the weapon design, because yeah, this weapon, while interesting looking, is just absolutely terrible. Yeah, so as much as I like this robot for what it represents, I didn't enjoy fighting it at ARC September meet, which is a bit of a shame because everything else at the September meet went really well for me. I was quite happy with everything else, and it was just the robot I designed at a young age that let me down. So realistically, past me is the problem here. Yeah, but I want to see this robot do well. I want to have it, you know, work better than it is. So there will be a video in the future at some point between now and the next ARC meet. We will go through and we'll fix up some of these issues because it can do better than this, and it can do better than this and still keep the Flaming Dragon spirit alive. So I'm going to try and do all of that. Yeah, anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.